Pancake, everyone. What do you imagine when you hear the word mutation? Perhaps like the superheroes in the comic books, you imagine super strong, super smart, and super powerful people? Well, in fact, mutations are changes that allow organisms to adapt to their environment. So we offer you a selection of the most unusual mutations found in humans around the world. Progeria, a very scary mutation. Most children with progeria die around the age of 13, though there are those who survive into their 20s. Usually the cause of death is a heart attack or a stroke. On average, 1 in 8 million children will have progeria. It is caused by mutations in the lamin AC gene, a protein that supports cell nuclei. Symptoms of progeria include stiff, hairless skin, bone abnormalities, stunted growth, and a distinctive nose shape. Progeria is of great interest to gerontologists, who hope to identify the connection between genetic factors and the aging process. Is it possible to cure such a disease, you might ask? Unfortunately, specific therapies for progeria have not been developed. Medical care for patients consists solely of alleviating the symptoms of the disease. Next comes Morphan syndrome. Morphan syndrome is an autosomal dominant disease that is genetic. The complex of symptoms characteristic to this syndrome was first described by the French pediatrician Antoine Bernard Morphan. He presented the clinical case of his 5-year-old patient named Gabrielle at a meeting of the Medical Society in Paris in 1896. Although today it is believed that Gabrielle had an entirely different disease, her external signs were forever named after the doctor who first grouped them into a separate syndrome. The mutation affects connective tissue, and in classic cases appears as elongated limbs, stretched fingers, and underdeveloped fat cells. In addition, Morphan syndrome can cause the ribs to bend inward or conversely to bulge. Also, the spine may be curved. And yet, it is the long limbs and fingers that are the most striking feature of this mutation. The physiology of people suffering from this disease may differ considerably from what is typical, and their anatomical appearance is more similar to that of classic aliens from sci-fi movies. Unner-Tan syndrome. Unner-Tan syndrome is characterized primarily by the fact that people suffering from it walk on all fours. It was discovered by the Turkish biologist Unner-Tan after studying 5 members of the Ulas family in rural Turkey. Most often people with this syndrome use primitive speech and have a congenital brain deficiency. In 2006, a documentary was made about the Ulas family, called The Family Walking on All Fours. Here's how Tan describes it. The genetic nature of the syndrome suggests a reverse step in human evolution, most likely caused by a genetic mutation. The reverse process of transition from quadrupedalism, walking on 4 limbs, to bipedalism, walking on 2. In this case, the syndrome corresponds to the theory of intermittent balance. The new syndrome, according to Tan, can be used as a living model of human evolution. Some researchers, however, do not take this seriously, and believe that the manifestation of the syndrome does not depend on the genome. Epidermodysplasia verruciformis. This abnormality is extremely rare, making its carriers susceptible to the widespread human papillomavirus, or HPV. This infection causes scaly spots and papules to form on the skin, growing on the hands, feet, and even the face. These growths look like warts, or more often resemble horns or wood. Typically, skin tumors begin to appear in people between the ages of 20 and 40 in areas exposed to sunlight. There is no complete cure, but with intensive therapy, the spread of the growths can be reduced or even halted for some time. The public became aware of this disorder in 2007, when a video of a 34-year-old Indonesian man appeared on the internet. In 2008, the man underwent surgery to remove 6 kilograms of growths from his body. The growths were removed from his arms, head, torso, and legs, and new skin was transplanted into these areas. In total, Kazwar was able to get rid of 95% of the warts, but unfortunately, after a while, they started to grow again, and the doctors believed that the surgery would have to be repeated every 2 years so that Kazwar could at least hold a spoon. Congenital Proteus syndrome. This is a very rare congenital disease, in which the bones and skin grow extremely fast. This syndrome, caused by mutations in a gene that regulates cell growth, causes organs and tissues to grow disproportionately to the rest of the body. Proteus syndrome can vary from person to person and can appear in different parts of the body. What is common is the overgrowth of tumors and deformity of limbs or certain parts of the body. One of the most famous examples of people who suffered from Proteus syndrome is Joseph Merrick, also known as the Elephant Man. So what do you think? Quite creepy, isn't it? Let's take a break, and in the meantime be sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. We would much appreciate it. Okay, let's move on. Next up, we have Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. It occurs in one male infant out of 380,000 and results in increased uric acid synthesis. Uric acid is released into the blood and urine as a result of chemical processes in the body. People with SLE get too much uric acid in the blood, which accumulates under the skin and eventually causes gouty arthritis. It can also lead to the formation of kidney and bladder stones. The disease also affects neurological function and behavior. People suffering from Lesch-Nyhan syndrome often have involuntary muscle contractions, which are expressed as cramps or disorderly waving of the limbs. Patients sometimes injure themselves by banging their heads against hard objects, biting their fingers and lips. Currently, there is no treatment for the neurological and behavioral aspects of the condition. Ectrodactyly, more commonly known as pinchers, and the term ostrich foot can also be found on the internet. It is a congenital anomaly of the feet and hands, characterized by the absence or underdevelopment of one or more toes. It occurs with equal frequency in both sexes. In the case of the typical form of the disease, claw hand, the probability of inheritance is 1 infant in 90,000 newborns. A typical ectrodactyly of the limbs is found in 1 out of 160,000 newborns. Treatment of ectrodactyly involves surgery. Often with this disease, surgery is performed in adolescence. It is aimed at correcting visual defects and restoring the function of the foot or hand. Hypertrichosis. Now, of course, werewolves don't actually exist, but people with hypertrichosis are called werewolves, or even monkey-like. Although they don't howl at the moon, they have hair in unexpected places. Their hair covers their abdomen, arms, legs, even the palms of their hands and soles of their feet. The hair can either be thick and stiff, or soft and thin, like baby fluff, colorless or colored. Excess hair can be controlled with modern procedures such as waxing, plucking, and laser hair removal. There have been about 50 known cases since the Middle Ages. This mutation most often affects natives of South Asia and the Mediterranean. Several symptoms associated with hypertrichosis are known. Inflammation of the gums is the most common. Xeroderma pigmentosum. This hereditary skin disease occurs when a person is hypersensitive to ultraviolet light. It is caused by a mutation in the proteins responsible for repairing damaged DNA, and appears when a person is exposed to ultraviolet radiation. The first symptoms usually appear in early childhood before the age of 3, when a child is exposed to the sun. He or she suffers severe burns after only a few minutes of exposure to the sun's rays. It is also characterized by freckles, dry skin, and irregular color changes of the skin. According to European and American doctors, about 4 out of 1 million people have the disease. In conclusion, we would also like to tell you about the no less terrible and unusual syndrome, Sirenomelia. Sirenomelia, or mermaid syndrome, is an abnormality expressed by the presence of only one lower limb in the newborn. Only 300 cases can be found in the literature, of which 15% are one of a pair of twins, and another 22% are babies born to mothers with diabetes mellitus. The probability of having a child affected by this syndrome is 1 in 60,000 to 100,000. Most die in infancy, but surgery can extend patients' lives into adolescence. Sirenomelia can be caused by both heredity and environmental factors. Sometimes there is only one artery and 2 branches of the aorta supplying blood to the lower body. This leads to a lack of nutrients and, as a consequence, underdevelopment. Mermaid syndrome is accompanied by spinal problems, and underdevelopment of the lungs is a frequent cause of death. There are 7 types of this mutation in the development of the lower limb, from having all of the necessary bones and skin to only 1 bone in the leg. Well, here we have looked at the strangest mutations in humans, and they are very diverse. Because throughout the course of time, there have been plenty of events that have caused the conditions for such transformations. If that were not the case, we would not be able to study the features of our body better. Thank you for watching, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with a friend. We wish you a pancake mood, and see you soon. Pancake, everyone!